So let's set the stage for what could be another eventful week for the market. Joining us now, Vital Knowledge founder Adam Crisafulli. Adam, it's great to have you on. I do want to talk about the week that's coming, but first, the week that was. Were you surprised to see stocks moving to record highs, given everything that we saw for investors to trade off of?
It was very impressive. If you kind of just look back over the course of the week, news flow definitely skewed towards the negative end of the spectrum. The CPI, I think, was better than feared, but I think it was more than overshadowed by the very hot PPI. The inflation data this morning was also very hot. You had a couple of disappointing earnings, Applied Materials and Deere, both July end reports that were quite negative. A couple of the final June end reports, CoreWeave, Tapestry, both were disappointing. So just a lot of negative news that the market absorbed very well, and like you said, continued to rally. So very impressive and definitely a little surprising, sure.
The big move in United Healthcare this week, up something like 22%. It's certainly been beaten down, and certainly for good reason, arguably. But the fact that you do have Berkshire Hathaway and other big firms starting to take stakes signals what about whether it's that name specifically or the value trade more broadly?
Yeah, I think managed care was probably the single most hated group of the entire market. Healthcare in general is very much out of favor. So, the move you saw today, I think, speaks just how thin and lean positioning is in this group. You've had a lot of very aggressive selling over the course of several months. Managed care has its own unique set of problems, and then healthcare more broadly. And so, again, I think this speaks to kind of just potentially a sentiment shift in healthcare. We'll have to see if it continues. There's still a lot of regulatory uncertainty around the group going forward. But definitely a positive indicator for that group that's been very beleaguered.
We've got this Trump-Putin meeting underway as we speak right now. Geopolitics, it's been one of those things that the market just continues to shrug off. Is there anything that would change that?
No, I don't expect there'll be any real seismic event coming out of this meeting. I guess your two tail events would be either, a wholesale ceasefire, which I don't think really is the expectation, and that's probably unlikely. Maybe you get a partial ceasefire. And then the other one on the opposite end would be real aggressive sanctions program that's implemented not just on Russia, but more important would be if you were to impose secondary sanctions on China, so large buyers of Russian oil. India already is being subject to those sanctions tariffs, but I think China would be the real big negative if that were to occur. I don't think either of those are likely, which is why markets aren't paying a ton of attention to this event. I think much more important in the mind of stocks is next week, where you have a big Powell speech and then a lot more earnings reports.
Oh, it's like you took my next question out of my mouth, Adam. What are you watching next week? Is it all the Fed speak and Jackson Hole? Is it retail earnings? Is it something else?
I think definitely most important will be Powell's speech. The Fed's at a really critical, difficult time right now. On the one hand, you have employment numbers, at least for the July jobs report, was quite disappointing for July, plus those revisions lower. And then on the other hand, you've had this week's inflation numbers, which, again, point to upside pressure, not just within the goods categories that are being impacted by tariffs, but also within services, which is quite ominous because services hopefully could have been one of the offsets. So I think Powell is going to have to acknowledge that jobs report, and in doing so, he will sound a little bit dovish, but he's also going to have to acknowledge this week's inflation numbers, which, again, I think will speak to just a very uncertain outlook. It's likely they will cut in September, but what happens beyond that, it's really up in the air at this point.